Good morning, y'all. This is Esmee Streachailt, and I am reading Rad Femme, Rad Mat Femme, and Rad Matri Femme, all ask humans to just grow the hell up already. This is a coda to my conversation with Jocelyn Crawley at WLRN at Women's Liberation Radio News. They were kind enough to invite me over. And that conversation was a lot of fun and very interesting and got into some really deep cracks and crevices and ideas about feminist love and what love looks like in a feminist world, what love can look like in feminist movement. And I had some further thoughts on a few of the places where Jocelyn and I were almost seeing things similarly, or maybe in direct disagreement. And I wanted to just unfold those a little bit more because I think it's entirely possible for different groups of radical feminists to have different views on certain things, on certain topics or policies or ways to move forward. But I think that they should understand each other really well, so that when we can find places where we want to work together and ways in which we want to work together, we can just dive in and build on those. So this coda begins now. I am the kind of mind that is forever unfolding into deeper subtleties wherever possible, or just grabbing a thought next to this one and seeing what happens, or who is just never done with a debate. It's not a temperament that leads to concise expression. Most of my thoughts are details about other ideas. I just never feel like I've really been clear, Here are some of those idea tales about some of the topics raised in my recent conversation with Jocelyn and her editorial coda to our conversation over at WLRN. All of which is linked here in the post and on our websites. When we study feminist work on love, ethics, relationships, we find many versions of this simple formula. We have to grow up. It's a request for humans to become their own selves in relation with emotional containment and interpersonal curiosity and desire for good of the other. In other words, a maturity that supports having a rich, full, even fun life. That's the simplest, I think, way to look at it. It doesn't sound sexy. It doesn't sound gimmicky. It's just, you have to grow up to get a good world. On the biology of male violence. So here's a problem for all feminists. Men's violence, and sexual violence specifically, enforces patriarchal domination by being a constant background, live threat to every woman's psychological and bodily integrity. This is the core insight of radical feminism. If you genuinely conclude that men are biologically toxic, rapey, violent humans, and to eliminate that violence, and you want to eliminate that violence from constricting and ending women's lives, then you have to remove the biology, the gene complex. The only way to do this is, as Valerie Solanas also concludes, is to kill a lot of men or neuter them to prevent reproduction. It's just like breeding dogs. You don't breed the aggressive puppy hoping to get companion dogs. Such deterministic radical feminists, like all evolutionary psychology bros, typically do not want to follow their own logic to its necessary conclusion. They're more like, it's genetic, shrug. So if all masculinity is toxic, that means harmful to life. If all biological maleness, right, is toxic masculinity, then why on earth did the process of sexual selection, which in nearly all species is governed by the females, including in humans, right down to the ovum choosing the sperm. Evolve, why did that system, a system the females control, evolve women who really prefer not being subjugated, raped, and murdered by men for profit, fun, and homosocial bonding? Even the process of a reversed sexual selection, patriarchy, in which males choose their mates, has not, in these 5,000 years, managed to evolve females who seek rapists to parent our children. That's why they have to fool us or drug us or kidnap and traffic us. And if maleness is biological and toxic and therefore universal, then how did all those matriarchies and matricultures exist for the, let's just call it 40,000 years we can prove before those 5,000 years we've been living in? It helps if our facts and our theory for organizing those facts into knowledge and our ideology actually align consistently with each other. This is one of the reasons Jane Clare Jones worked out a radical and materialist feminism. It's a hybrid of radical and socialist material feminist theories that opens pathways where each of them hits a cul-de-sac. A theory is supposed to describe and help us effectively interact with the world. It needs both accuracy and flexibility because neither knowledge nor the world are stable, unchanging piles of rocks. If a theory is divorced from the world, but imposed in every case anyway, this is a move called overdetermination, which leads to both grave errors and totalitarianism. In anthropology, overdetermination is the error of attributing a behavior or cultural practice with many causes or influences to just one cause or influence. It's a very patriarchal silver bullet kind of thinking. It's a flattening, an erasure, an embarrassing mistake in an era when we know just how complex our world really is. The more research we do into the nature-nurture debate, the more nurture is winning. Boys have to be trained to be the desiccated thing we call men in our culture. Low emotional intelligence and violence are not the natural fate of the human male. Here from the article I linked to on the subject. It has been suggested that the antisocial behaviors related to high testosterone are a function of the manner by which dominance is maintained in these groups. Robert Josephs of the University of Texas at Austin. In other words, if researchers were to study other groups of folks, say the rich and famous, they might discover that testosterone is connected not to violence, but to who drives the biggest SUV or has the nicest lawn. Testosterone is a hormone related to status, related to prestige and dominance, right? Dominance is a very physical synonym for prestige. So prestige can also be culturally assigned to cars or lawn care or human care work or excellence at supporting a community. As I said in the episode with Jocelyn, contribution could be prestigious. This is fantastic news. It affirms the radical feminist hope that men, while recalcitrant, are neurally and socially plastic. They can be different to this. Rejoice! We don't have to cull the herd to survive the millennium. Feminist love is only enacted in reciprocity, in mutual support of human unfolding. And domination relations block and stunt the human instinct for connection and mutual regard. Status can be accrued to anything, like shoes that don't really fit, for example. Excellence in sport, owning lots of purely digital money. So that if we, women, the ones who do the sexual selecting, tie social status to service, to contribution, then we move towards something closer to the matriarchies or communities of care we actually evolved in, that are our natural default, and that patriarchy alienates us from in every part of our being. This is the difference between separatist radical feminism and radical materialist feminism. Radical materialist feminism is not sure, but hopeful that men are capable of being more human than patriarchy allows. It means we can go out of business one day. It means we can center women and children as a way of life that becomes the norm and not live in fear of men every day of our lives. Is that not the goal? In support of this idea, I've linked here my review of Carol Gilligan's In a Human Voice over at The Radical Notion, which is some very useful and encouraging reading, both the review and the book itself. On interrelation and reciprocity, these are two of the other terms that we talked about. At base, feminist love asks us to take our best ethical systems seriously and live them. It's really that simple. The big shift is that all of our traditional, most intuitive, therefore, ethical systems were, you got it, written about and for men, and deliberately excluded women from the capacity for moral reasoning or ethical behavior. Kant, bro, I'm looking at you. Among the thinkers and researchers who have thought about ethics and assumed that women are also moral agents, well, a fox just went by through my front yard and now my dog is losing it. So far, trouble is not barking at this fox. Oh, there it is. Beastie. Beastie. We're okay. We're okay. It's just a fox. I know. I know. Trouble. No. Nope. Come here. Trouble, come. That's a good dog. Sit. You're okay. You're okay. It's all right. I know. Come here. Hey, come here. Hi. There you go. That's a good dog. Settle down. Hey, settle down. Chill out. Good boy. Right. Back to our programming. Where was I? Kant, bro, I'm looking at you. Among the thinkers and researchers who have thought about ethics and assumed that women are also moral agents are the sociologist Carol Gilligan and the philosophers Luce Irigaray and Iris Murdoch. That would be enough to get you going for the rest of your life thinking about these questions. The latter there, Iris Murdoch, being a great thinker of process relations and moral imagination. Two concepts that stand behind values like social justice or people before profit, like mutual respect and care, like feminism and anarchism and matriarchy. Yeah, I know about the dog. Sorry, I just record these things in the middle of my life because women live our lives in the middle of the world and things happen even when we are recording for our friends. So we had a little discussion about control. What does control mean? What is control? In the podcast. So I'm elaborating on that conversation just a little bit. I think control is a spectrum, wink, wink. It runs from impositional control, power over, to emergent control, power with. Violent domination, state and colonial violence, interpersonal and sexual violence, coercive control, propaganda, cultural and social traditions sometimes, raising and socializing children, the discipline of learning, training in a physical discipline like dance or martial arts, applying skill to a craft, art, project, from space travel to architecture to watercolor painting, meditation, mature emotional regulation. These are all flavors of control. Dictators use impositional forms of control, power over. Someone like Marie Curie or Emily Dickinson use emergent ones, power with. In our human lives, most of us use a range of control. Even an anarchist community uses forms of control to operate and care for the people in it. It will have practices on which it relies, even without any ultimate authorities wielding state power. Its values are its controls rather than its law or its police or military. These communities emphasize the emergent forms that require attentive relation, a fundamental quality of feminist love. control and feminist values are not even in tension with each other. It's an interesting element of work in matriarchies, for example, that when we study existing ones, we see everyone working, and much of the work is meeting basic needs, creating food, cleaning the home and community, etc. And wage labor too. The need for control in the Foucauldian discipline way, where we have to be disciplined to work for others' profit, is not prevalent because we are not working in a totally alienated way, creating surplus value for some CEO. Rather, all work is care work, work for the clan and community. At least we find this in many traditional, family-based such communities. And again, these are not perfect utopias. What they are, however, are communities that are not fundamentally structured by violence. Work or starve, obey or suffer. Because your labor and service are not expropriated to distant, powerful strangers. On feminist violence, Jocelyn and I disagreed about violence and its relationship to feminist movement and change. I'm not ruling it out. She rules it out. I don't. Direct action, for example, economic disruptions, for example, and burning down the reputations of rapists is not violence. Direct actions solve problems without permission. Economic disruptions are telegrams to the owner class from the hinterlands here below, and the burning down of the reputations of rapists should lead to the social death it seems to take to get them to stop. Drastic, even risky, certainly strict, maybe ruthless, but not violent. They can all be elements of this fight for women to survive and die natural deaths, to live unmolested by men and become whatever we may be. It is as asymmetric as it gets, this fight, and many on one side delight in the violence, a regime that crushes its women for continued control and security, a regime that begins a 3-week bombing campaign on a Muslim nation on a Friday night in the middle of Ramadan, a regime that levels a territory it has held in apartheid for decades. These are violence, historical violence. And feminism makes big historical claims, no doubt. Sure, Radmat Femme wants to arrive in the new world that answers to the poly crisis. I call it the Omega crisis because it's the last one of our our civilizations may ever get to have, this Omega crisis. Sure, Radmat Femme suspects that the nutritive rather than toxic world is an adapted form of our ancestral matriarchies. I've said before, and I will say it here, we need to take big swings, or rather, we need to get in a position to take big historical swings. But how we get to that position is wildly unpredictable. Our prophet, Lauren Oya Olamina of Earthseed, from Octavia Butler's Parables, practices her rifle aim every week, just like everyone else in the community. Surviving total social breakdown could be a war of all against all. We don't know. And if it's not that, if it's not what is predicted in the parables, well, what's wrong with a stronger body, the ability to defend yourself, and a skill you can apply to hunting food for your people? Not one thing. Moreover, if we are peaceful because we cannot become violent when necessary, then we are not peaceful. We are subjugated. Only people equal in dignity and agency can be peaceful. To take power in order to destroy power, as Françoise Daubonne teaches, will look like violence to many even when it's benefiting them. Power is an abstraction of very real things: money, protection, the ability to apply force or coercion, the agency to make decisions that affect others. As I said in the podcast, you can tell who has power because all they have to do is say no. They don't have to explain or offer terms or write detailed studies of problems that have already been studied in order to prove a legitimate need should be redressed if power is in the mood. I would love to see more women skilled in the use of violence. This is not the same thing as violent women. But women skilled can do more to refuse the ultimate no that power has. That makes the ultimate no less powerful. I mean what I said about girls learning self-defense. This is a skill of violence. And finally, my attitude about feminist violence is this. I simply do not know what the future will require of us. The concept of people before profit. Economics as we know it is a lie. The market is run by computers trading against each other while you and I work to keep body and soul together, fed and dry. We do that in a system that runs on turning our needs and wants into money for other people. That encourages us to consume stuff, accumulate stuff, because our needs do not create enough profit all on their own. Here I have two links to two different economists who have two different theories of how to solve this problem. One of them is Clara Mattei. She's a very dangerous economist running a very interesting project in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's called the Forum for Real Economic Emancipation, or FREE. And the other is Gary's Economics. And if you are not familiar with Gary and Gary's Economics, I think you should be, because he puts things very clearly, very simply, and is on the side of the good. So in love, in feminist love, in a paradigm beyond ownership and extraction, we do not have relationships. We are in them. Indeed, we are embedded in nothing but relation. Rad Mat Fem does not understand this embeddedness as a complex future goal we must create from the ground up. We understand this embeddedness in relation as the condition of all existence, one that capitalist patriarchy ignores as at our now obvious peril. All aliveness is relational, interdependent, permeable, and evolving. Even human cultures. For more on this, take a tour of process philosophy. Phenomenologists like Henri Bergson see Creative Evolution especially. It's just a freaking amazing book of philosophical work on how life unfolds from a philosophical point of view. Take a look at the feminist philosophers Luce Irigaray and Iris Murdoch, who I mentioned earlier, and look at the human relational psychological models of Carol Gilligan and relational life therapy. These all resonate with our actual being. They become almost intuitively and immediately clear. I mean, except for Irigaray, because she's hard to read. But the others make a lot of sense almost instantly, because they're describing what we are really living in, right? Your very metabolism is a process of relation with the world. You take the world in and you excrete what you don't need, right? Which itself should be able to turn into some more world. Patriarchal relation as property rights reserves and denigrates this embeddedness, patriarchal relation as property rights reverses and denigrates this embeddedness, lets the default male stand outside nature and pretend that it and women belong to him. The whole operation grates and harrows the actual relational and reciprocal nature of all things, which is why our world is so painful to live in, so sickening to the world and to us, and on its way out. The basis of the patriarchal subject, default man, the godlet, Jane's word, is an ideal of isolation that would and does actually destroy most living things. The embeddedness in relationality needed to operate in feminist love is humble always and humbling until we learn to stand in our human authenticity. That is to grow the hell up. On toxic masculinity, one more time. Adjectives exist to help us distinguish elements of nouns and among nouns that belong to a larger category. Every part of all varieties of the hellebore plant are toxic. That's why there is no designation toxic hellebore. It's just plain hellebore. Men, as problematic and toxic, even poisonous and lethal, as many of them are not all toxic. Hence the adjective. That would already have been the end of the human species had that been the case. Patriarchy, however, is all toxic. Whatever is natural in humans would be hard to parse after 5,000 years of this fuckery. By striking at sexuality and mating, patriarchy reverses the natural order, as I argued above. It takes sexual selection out of the evolutionary process described by Darwin and reinforced by nearly every biologist after him. Female chooses mates. Females choose mates with the qualities they think will give their babies the best chance at survival. Best chance at survival is what Darwin meant by trouble. It's all right. Best chance at survival is what Darwin meant by fittest. But fittest is tricky because nature also constantly throws surprises and accidents into the process, like giant meteors or 2 million years of rain or fire or flood or earthquake. Or one can be very, very fit for a set of natural circumstances that can change pretty fast, and then not so fit. By passing its subjugation, by placing its subjugation of women on sex, basing its subjugation of women on sex, patriarchy appropriates from the female the process of sexual selection and proceeds to encourage the most brutal men to breed a lot. Turning women into sites of extraction, of reproduction, labor, emotional support, and violent entertainment is no part of the natural order. If it is, as I have said before, feminists need to put down our mics, our pens, books, and keyboards and pick up our weaponry. If all masculinity and all men are live dangers to women at all times, and this is the natural order, and our goal is to care for women, center women, protect women, our only recourse to creating safety for women is to cull the male herd. Feminists who argue that all men, all masculinity are toxic, violent, deadly to women, but do not then follow their own logic, are more in the business of staying in business while doing feminism than of actually solving patriarchy. Meanwhile, women are still looking for many qualities other than brutality. And now that we finally have had the social power to make our own choices of mate again, the brutal shithead godlets are feeling the pressure and responding with bullshit like the SAVE Act and Project 250. The phrase toxic masculinity describes a complex of human behaviors that are harmful or deleterious to others, and often the agent himself. To oversimplify, the comparison is not between toxic masculinity and wholesome femininity, but between toxic and wholesome masculinities. These are both complexes of behavior and of intentions. A motive, after all, is a goal. Charm can be a sign of genuine interest and elegant curiosity, or it can be cover for a malignant desire to manipulate. But it looks the same at first. The first is an element of wholesome personality, genuine interest, elegant generosity, because it is relationally intended. And the second is toxic because it is extractive in its intention. We have to feel our way into understanding them either way. We do have toxic femininities too, and we know good and well that they are not the only kind of feminine. Why would the situation be different with men? There's also just numbers. One rapist is typically also responsible for something like 1,200 other crimes of abuse and assault against people in his lifetime. One toxic man does way more harm in the world than he should be able to do. And while there are many such men, their collective effect is far, far larger than their numbers. As a feminist, I want us to hold on to two facts here. One, the harm is how we should measure the severity of the problem, not the number of men doing it. And two, wholesome men also affect many hundreds or thousands of people in ways that are good for them. And good men, with a bit more real courage than we see in them now, are the antidote to toxic men. Radical feminists have always believed in the existence and agency of wholesome masculinity and good men. One of our goals is to see more of it and more of them. It is patriarchy that teaches men that they are naturally atavistic, violent, lustful competitors in a zero-sum game of wealth and prestige. Patriarchy wants toxic men. It must create them. It does not accommodate them. It builds them. And it builds them mostly to serve the incredibly toxic men at the top of that hierarchy. The people we now refer to as the Epstein class, the ruler class, the sort of governments behind the governments, the network behind the governments. You see it in the US manosphere to far-right pipeline. They want angry, entitled, violent young men to help them subjugate you and me. But the disciplines of socialization remain imperfect, and some men remain more wholesome than the system would prefer. You see this in the breakdown of individuals in military basic training. Most men and women have to be remade from regular humans into soldiers ready to use lethal force. If men were just naturally violent and dominating and driven to control others at all cost, they would only need to be trained to aim well and wait for orders. That is not what basic training is. I see no reason for radical feminists or radical materialist feminists to hold patriarchal beliefs or values. Except maybe wanting to stay in this work forever, having no other vocation or interest. Like, I can think of a lot of things, a lot of interests and abilities I would like to develop in my life. I don't really want to dissect and correct patriarchy my whole life long. I agree. Good men need to do better and more consistently. Here's a quote from Lissa Rankin's Substack, The Body is a Trailhead, in an article, Why Are So Many Powerful Good Guys Gaslighting Us About the Epstein Files? I also want more consistency from men. Lissa writes, but I do love and respect and appreciate many men who do their best to be good men. I assume all good men, all men with empathy, all men with hearts, all men who call themselves doctors or healers or therapists or trauma healing model builders, at the very least, would join us women in our moral outrage, center us for a while, and validate our pain and the wrongness of it all. Some men I know are indeed responding that way. But far too many good guys are acting really squirrely, irrational, and flat out wrong-headed. They get defensive the minute you even mention words like patriarchy or misogyny or male entitlement, which we all know as male fragility. But shouldn't we all be on the same page when it comes to believing and validating Epstein's victims and holding anyone who was an accomplice or enabler of Epstein to account? Why are these alleged good guys insinuating that women have gone crazy, that Epstein's victims are lying or exaggerating, or that women with moral outrage are preparing for some kind of witch hunt? Oh, there is toxic masculinity, and bad men embody it. They do global scales of harm to women, children, and institutional society. They must be changed for that to change. But the idea that they might change necessarily means we know of a wholesome masculinity that they could embody instead. All patriarchy is toxic. That's why we just call it patriarchy. Patriarchy is hellebore without the gorgeous winter flowers, which is to say ugly, serrated, and sharp. On intellectual property and political boundaries. I really didn't want to write this bit. I was hoping I wouldn't have to, but I'm gonna. Someday, after the revolution, as the socialists say, we will not link creativity or thought to physical property in our economic systems. But we currently do. And feminists have almost no access to these properties as feminists. We are anathema, canceled. So, credit for our creativity and cleverness and work and effort is essential as two elements of our work. One, it honors women's work and brilliance, both of which are erased in patriarchy and capitalism. And two, it helps us keep our boundaries as feminists with differing theories, prioritized goals, and even political commitments or allies. Those differences can be useful and great when we find ways to work across them, when we find the issues where we overlap. Some of those differences, however, are going to remain intractable. When one or more radical feminists, in quotation marks, take some pretty clearly not radical feminist choices, the patriarchs stereotype us all as whatever the least rigorous of us have done. And it really fucks with our ability to make any material and effective progress for women. To that point, WLRN is not the origin of the following definition of patriarchy and Medusa Rising's own mission. Patriarchy is the interlocking legal, economic, cultural, and religious systems and traditions that support male supremacy. It was born in the commodification, rape, and murder of women. It has existed in remarkably consistent forms for 5,000 years, and Medusa Rising means for this millennium to be its last. We are very pleased that these sisters at WLRN read our website and agree with us, however. U.S. feminists operate in a world of no money and no access to power. So the one thing we have and can offer each other is clear and enthusiastic credit for and sharing of our work and creations. This is not the first time I have seen a feminist organization accidentally blur the lines of intellectual credit or origination. I would like us all to be more respectful. Feminism, love, duty. This is like a subsection of the intellectual property and political boundaries section. Feminism, love, duty. We have a duty to win. That's what I keep front of mind. We have a duty to win for the sake of our sisters and future great-great-granddaughters. To win, we will have to develop our facility with feminist love for each other and practice it every day. At the same time, feminism has boundaries. Radical feminism has boundaries. It has commitments. It is not a brand or a social club. It does not include, among its values or commitments, the surrender of women's rights to one group of men rather than another. It does not make friends with the authors of such policies as the SAVE Act or Project 2025 or Project 2050. Rights, serious political actors understand, are not badges. They are not civil. They are instead civil guarantees of material resources for living a human life. The vote, an education, employment to keep a roof, etc., etc. These resources help people be alive and determine the course of their own lives. Take that away and you have only subjugation. Genocide is not feminist. Goalless military excursions are not feminist. Manipulative uses of civilian aid are not feminist. Supporting racists and rapists is not feminist. Confusing sex for gender and insisting that some men are women is not feminist. Threatening to annihilate feminists for holding to our values and commitments is not feminist, and it certainly is not love. It's hard, love is. It requires that we stand in our truths, that we discuss them honestly, and that we part ways if we cannot reconcile them. It requires that we grow up enough to know the difference between a paradox and a contradiction, and to accept that how we want the political landscape to be hedged and how it is actually hedged may not match. That's it. there you go. I hope you are all safe. I hope we can bring the madness of this historical moment to a close really soon. Meanwhile, be good to each other. Be excellent in yourselves. Okay. See you soon.